Welcome everybody. Today we are going to be looking at how to submit an offer on HomePath.com. These are Fannie Mae properties that are listed on this website, and you will have identified by looking in the MLS and looking at the MLS sheet that any offer that is to be made on the property you're looking at must be made through the HomePath.com website. So just to give you a little tip, not all Fannie Mae properties are listed on the HomePath website, but many of them are, and so for that reason, if you want to make an offer for your customer on a Fannie Mae property, you're going to need to do so on the HomePath.com website in many cases. So I want to take you through today some basics on how to get registered and how to make an offer on a property. So the very first thing that you're going to do is you're going to search for the property that you have found in the MLS, and you're going to type in the address of the property here on the HomePath website. And you can see the URL for the HomePath website is homepath.com there in the upper left hand part of my screen. So go ahead and search the property that you're interested in offering on. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the Make an Offer section here. There's a button right here, and you're going to need to get registered as a real estate professional. So if you look up here, you've got sign up and log in. I don't want you to fool with these right now. What I want you to do is go to Make an Offer. The system's going to identify that you're not signed in yet, and it's going to give you an option as a real estate professional to go ahead and register. So I want you to click on that register button and then fill all of this information out that is necessary to create an account. And this is going to give you the ability to set up a username and password and to have your own login account as an administrator and an agent in HomePath.com. So you can then make future offers for any of your customers as a real estate professional. Okay, so once you've done this, you hit create account, you'll set up your information, you'll be able to log in. What we're going to do for this exercise is I'm going to go ahead and log in because I have already established an account. You will be able to do so as well once you register. All right, we're going to go back to that property that we looked at just a moment ago, and we are going to talk about some basics here. So the first thing I want you to notice on here is that the property list price is here. It is telling us that it's back on the market. That could mean that it was listed and maybe a contract failed. We don't know, but we do know it's back on the market. A couple things I want you to be aware of. Over here on the right hand side, you're going to see a little blip here on the side called First Look. And what this is that this is an opportunity for owner-occupants to purchase the home ahead of time before investors are able to make an offer on the property. So if you had an investor buyer on this particular house, they would not be able to make an offer for 9 more days. But if you had an owner-occupant or somebody who wanted to truly occupy the property, they could go ahead and make an offer on this property now during the first look period. So that is a distinction, and you do need to be aware of that. I know a lot of these foreclosed homes are attractive to your investors, so you need to be aware that if they're not going to occupy the property, they must not make an offer during that first look period, and there is no room for them not doing that during that period of time. They must occupy the property legally for them to be able to purchase it. So make sure you put that in your notes. All right, the next thing we're going to look at here is how to make an offer. If I hover over this little purple text here, the middle of your screen, and I click on how to make an offer, some things are going to come up. Of course, you're going to get some resources here at the top, and if you'll follow along with my cursor, you'll see where I'm going. These are some instructions for how to complete an offer. These will help supplement this video today. They'll give you some additional insight into what you need to do to make an offer. There's also an 800 number over here that you can contact if you need support for doing an offer. And then there's some additional training materials down here at the bottom. But the area that I want to focus on today is called offer-related documents and templates. And the two that you're going to use most commonly are the real estate purchase addendum and the owner-occupant certification. Now, simply put, the owner-occupant certification is a certification from the buyer that they promise they will live in the home. So again, we go back to that first look period and we say that it must be an owner-occupant. Now, if it's an investor and we're outside of the first look period, then they don't need to sign the owner-occupant certification because guess what? They're not going to be owner-occupants, okay? So let's take a quick look at that particular form here, and I just want to share it with you briefly, okay? This basically just says that the property address listed here is going to in fact be occupied by the buyer. The purchaser or purchasers is going to sign. but so are you. So you're going to attest that to your knowledge, the buyer is going to live in the property. So just be aware of that. That's an important component. All right, the next thing we're going to do here is the other tab that we could click on there was called the Real Estate Purchase Addendum, if you recall, and I'll go back to that briefly here, and that is this tab right here. And the Real Estate Purchase Addendum, just so that you understand, is it's a part of the offer process, and the Real Estate Purchase Addendum is actually going to override your FAR as is contract here in the state of Florida. And so you're going to prepare a regular contract from the back office, just like you normally would, but you're going to supplement it with this Real Estate Purchase Addendum, which actually changes some of the terms in the contract, undoes certain language, and we're going to go through that briefly today so you understand some of the most important points of what that addendum does. But it would be a great idea if you would download this addendum ahead of time before you ever get a HomePath offer and just get familiar with some of the sections. But we're going to talk about some of them as we go through this today. Okay, so we're going to move back to the addendum here real quick, and my goal is to walk through this with you so that you can understand it better. All right, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to fill out the name of the seller and the buyer. You're also going to need to put the REO number at the top. This can actually be found on the home page here. If you're actually looking at the property, the REO number is right here. So I'm just going to kind of hover over it. This is the ID that you're going to need to use when you're filling this out. So just be aware of that at this time. Okay, so go ahead and plug that in here. All right, paragraph 1, the offer. Obviously, the offer is going to be for a specific amount. In this case, perhaps we would say it would be $100,000. There's going to need to be an earnest money delivered down here in paragraph B. And here's a tip for you: if it's a cash property, if it's a cash offer rather, you're going to need to make a 10% earnest money. That is mandatory. But if it's financing, you can make whatever escrow is appropriate for the price home that you're offering on. Okay, time is of the essence, so closing shall take place on or before X date. I would recommend that you do, 30 or 45 days, depending on the type of financing. You should have spoken to the lender. If it's a cash offer, then that will just be as quickly as title can get through the process of getting everything ordered and do what they need to do. We have closed some of these in as quick as 2 weeks. Some of them take a little longer, just depends on what happens at the title company and what their schedule looks like. Financing. Is this property contingent on financing? Is it not contingent on financing, or is it going to be cash? Fill out whichever of these options is appropriate. I do recommend, if you are doing financing, that you should check that it is contingent on financing. That's going to protect the buyer. Conventional FHA or VA, you must specify what type of financing they're getting. If this agreement is contingent on financing, then the purchaser shall apply for a loan for a loan of the agreed upon amount. So this should be the purchase price. So if the purchase price is $100,000, they should be applying for a loan of $100,000. The term is going to be how long the loan is for. As you know, it's either going to be 15 or 30 years in most cases. And basically, they need to get a loan commitment from the lender and deliver to the seller a loan commitment within a certain amount of time. I would recommend at no less than 30 days for this. In some cases, your lender might tell you to ask for a little more, but 30 days would be typical. So if we're making an offer on the 1st, perhaps we would put the 31st as the date that the loan commitment would be done by. Okay? All right, moving forward to paragraph 4. The purchaser either does or does not intend to occupy the property. This must be answered honestly and truly. I can't stress that enough. All right, as we move forward through some of the pre-printed text, there are some things in here that you're going to want to get familiar with. I do ask that you read over this and get familiar with it prior to making an offer. Title and closing services. Purchaser will obtain title and escrow closing services from one of the following. You want to check seller's escrow. If you do a different escrow company, although it is allowed, your buyer is going to incur a lot more costs. So we do recommend that you check seller's escrow. The title company will let you know what documentation they need and where they're located for closing and things like that. In many cases, if they're not in your town, they'll send a mobile closer to close these properties out. All right. There are going to be some deed restrictions in some of the communities that you're going to be working in, but Fannie Mae will decide what those deed restrictions are, and they will fill this portion of the addendum out as you get closer to an acceptance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. All right, as we move through some of the pre-printed stuff, we are still going to be conscious of what we're seeing here, and we're going to move down to the next area that needs to be filled out. And we're still moving through it. Okay, additional terms or conditions. This would be a place that you would actually put some pre-printed language in. So what I'm going to do for you is there's a specific paragraph that needs to go here for every single offer. And it also needs to go into the additional terms of your as-is FAR/BAR real estate contract. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a PDF with that language embedded in it to this video so that you're able to access that and at any time that you need it, because it is a little wordy, and you got to make sure that you have that on there. If you don't, they won't consider the offer. Essentially all it does is it makes this addendum supersede your state contract. So, but it has to be on there. All right, you're also going to fill out the information for your buyers, all their information, so make sure you have that handy before you start this process. You're also going to fill out all of your information and the selling agent's information on here as well. The purchaser is going to initial and sign this entire addendum. So I do encourage you to get familiar with it because you want to explain it to them if they ask questions. You want to be able to go through that process. Okay, so that really covers the majority of this addendum. I'm just going to scroll back to the top here and make sure that there was nothing that we didn't cover, because I want to make sure that you have all of the information that you need. And it does look like we covered everything on this addendum. Okay, as normal, if you have questions about this process, you can always contact your broker, and we are always more than happy to help you with any questions you might have. All right, so we have completed the addendum, and the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go into the back office and create a sales contract for this particular property. So I'm going to log in here, and all right, so in this case, I'm not really going to need any addendums. So just the one thing that you should know is that when you have a HomePath property, they do not sign any addendums other than their own. So if you're normally accustomed to putting specific addendums together, like maybe an appraisal contingency or a defective drywall, these are not things that Fannie Mae will sign. You can send them to them, but they won't sign them. So be aware of that. So in this case, what we're really going to do is we're going to be filling out just a as-is contract, and I want to go through a couple pieces of that with you real quick, so because I think they are really important. And there's some things that you need to know on here about the Fannie Mae. Okay, all right. So this should look really familiar to you if you've done much business, and that is the as-is contract. Of course, the seller and buyer, we know, all this information pretty much is going to be consistent, but there are a few things that may be asked of you depending upon the listing agent. So some of them may ask you to strike through the personal property here with actually just like a pen and actually strike through that none of this personal property conveys. That does not mean that the refrigerator and the dishwasher won't be there. It simply means that Fannie Mae is not going to guarantee that it will be there because these homes are foreclosed. If for some reason somebody breaks in and takes the dishwasher and the refrigerator before closing, Fannie Mae is not under any contractual obligation to replace those items. So do check with the listing agent for their preference. I have seen some of them that will ask you to strike through this with a pen. I have also had some that have said that it's not necessary, but put that note down in your notes because that's something you're going to want to talk about. Obviously, you're going to fill all this out as normal. You will need to put in the Fannie Mae preferred title company, which you can get from the listing agent, as the destination for the earnest money and the closing. You're also going to need to fill out your closing date and your time for acceptance, very much in the same way that you would on a normal contract. This contract, of course, must be unassignable, and so you must check that box there. You're going to fill all of the financing information out, whether it's cash or whether it's contingent on financing, just like you did on the real estate purchase addendum. And the reason I started with the purchase addendum and I'm going back to the contract is I want you to remember that the purchase addendum by Fannie Mae supersedes anything we put in here. So if we were to write any additional language in here, in many and almost all cases, that addendum is going to undo anything we put in here. So this is more a formality about specific terms, and we need to be aware that that is the case. So, all right, this is kind of a big one here. Closing costs, documentary stamps paid for by the seller. So these are all your seller paid closing costs and all your buyer paid closing costs. Documentary stamps will actually be paid for by the buyer in this case. And you might say, well, why is that? The seller pays doc stamps. Well, Fannie Mae does not pay doc stamps. They will not pay the state doc stamps that are required. So then what you need to do is you need to figure out how much that's going to be based upon how much your state charges for doc stamps, and then you need to add that to your buyer's closing costs because they're actually going to be charged for those doc stamps. Again, some agents and listing agents will ask you to draw a line through this to really be clear that those doc stamps are not going to be paid for by the seller, but for the most part, the addendum that we filled out a few moments ago will take care of that. We won't have to do that. The other thing is on these particular transactions, they in many cases will not allow an admin fee to be on here. You can charge it, but it has to be accomplished through a different vehicle. The vehicle that I would recommend you use, of course, is the buyer-broker agreement. It is disclosed in there, but they will, in most cases, ask you to remove this from the contract prior to Fannie Mae actually signing it. So just be aware of that. Again, any of these nuances you can confirm with the listing agent what their preference is. Each listing office is a little different, but Fannie Mae does have their guidelines. So I'm just trying to make you aware of all the ones in the many of these deals I've done that I have encountered. All right, again, seller shall designate closing agent. That is just like on the addendum. No home warranty. We're not going to ask for a home warranty on here. Seller shall pay installments due prior to closing, and buyer shall pay installments after closing. So line 183 here, this should be checked as A for Fannie Mae. Okay. As we scroll through some of the pre-printed information here, the typical home inspection period for Fannie Mae is 10 days or less. So I know it's 15 on the contract, but they will not sign 15. They want you to find out if you want the property in a quick amount of time, and if you don't want it, they want to put it back on the market. So I do recommend that you ask for the 10 days. In some cases, they may reduce that, but 10 is where you should start. Okay. As we move down to the end of this contract, we're going to come to an area where you're going to be expected to fill out and add in any addendums. So you could always check other here and write in, real estate purchase addendum. And then in these additional terms, there's going to be some additional language that you're going to need to type in here. And it's kind of wordy. So again, as I said before, I'm going to include that language in the PDF supplement that comes along with this, as well as some screenshots of the process to making an offer on the Fannie Mae property. All right. You're going to need to put in the cooperating broker's information, the listing broker's information. All that's going to be normal. So if you haven't watched our as-is contract tutorial on the YouTube channel, you should do that. If you know how to write a contract, most of this is going to be pretty much easy for you if you've done quite a few of them. So I just want to make you aware of that. All right. So at this stage of the game, we filled out the real estate purchase addendum. We have also filled out the as-is real estate contract and its completion. And now we're going to move back to the offer submission page where we were before. And we're going to go through and we're going to highlight this button called Make an Offer. Okay? And I want to take you through the process of making the offer online here because these are the steps that you're going to do. You're going to fill out all of the items that have an asterisk, a red asterisk, or what's required. You're going to fill out the buyer's first and last name, their address, the city and state, basically everything here that has an asterisk next to it. All right. The first thing that it's going to ask you is, has the purchaser purchased a Fannie Mae property before? Answer this honestly and proceed to the next section. What is the offer amount? Obviously, in this case, the offer is $100,000. We've talked about that. How would you like to determine the seller's contribution to closing cost? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to do a dollar amount here, and we're going to say that we're asking for $3,000 in closing costs, not $30,000. Okay, this is just an example here that I'm filling this out. Make sure that this matches what's on your contract if in fact you're asking for closing costs. Are there any other seller concessions? Please provide. So if they're asking for money for a roof or for a pool pump, again, guys, most of the time Fannie Mae not looking to give you a whole lot, but I have seen them contribute some things. So make sure that you're respectful and ask for what your buyer wants you to ask for, but still inform them that it is a foreclosure at the end of the day, and there might be limitations that Fannie Mae has on how much concession they're willing to give in these different areas. So that's just a tip. All right, any repair amounts or anything like that that you want would be here. You're going to have to write some detail as far as that goes. And I had said before that other concessions, you probably would be best put, if you're doing like a roof or a pump, to put them in the repair amount here instead and give some detail to that. So that's a little clarification there. That's a little change in the submission form that they've made, but that's okay. What type of financing are they getting? And you have your normal options here. You have cash, VA, FHA, and conventional. You also have other, because there are forms of financing that are not listed on there, like USDA, maybe a portfolio loan or something like that. But fill out whatever it is. Down payment amount, the amount of the down payment. Again, if it's cash, remember it does need to be 10%. So we would need to put $10,000 in earnest money if this was a cash offer. Otherwise, it can be whatever you and the buyer agree upon as the offer. The loan commitment date, this date should match the loan commitment date that we had in the real estate purchase addendum. So be sure, we said that should typically be 30 days. I think we discussed it being the 31st of the month in that scenario. So that would need to be matched here as well. What type of buyer are they? An investor or owner-occupant? Fill that out. Does your buyer intend to use the property as a second home or vacation home? Answer that as well. That's a simple yes or no. Public funds. So if you have a county, for instance, if you're in Pasco County and the buyer is using Pasco County down payment assistance, you would need to put that in here. So that would just be an example of public funds. It's not a disqualifier for your buyer, but the seller wants to know where they're getting their money from. What's the source? What's the buyer's representation? Is it in-house, meaning is this a listing that Florida Luxury Realty has in its possession, or are you co-broking? And in most cases, you'll probably be co-broking, meaning that another office might have the listing. Okay. Has the buyer been pre-qualified? That should be a yes, of course, as you know. We probably wouldn't be out with them and writing an offer if they haven't. Does the buyer currently own or rent? Has the buyer for this property owned a home in the last 3 years? So these are all drop downs that give you the option to select the answer that is appropriate. So I encourage you to double check this as you're answering these and make sure that they're correct. All right. Has buyer completed the framework homeownership course on HomePath.com and request the $75 fee to be reimbursed? There is a program on here that will give them that they do pay for, so that if there is HomePath money available, they will qualify for that. In my experience, I have never had a customer qualify for that. So you can get more information on the framework program here by clicking on the information tablet, but that would be something that you'd need to do at your discretion. All right, earnest funds amount. So up here we talked about, I'm going to go back to the top. Up here we talked about the earnest money, but the actual dollar amount here is going to need to be placed in this. So the earnest fund amount, we're at $100,000. We're going to do cash in this scenario. Then it would need to be $10,000 as an earnest money. And so you would put that in there. All right, will the buyer be using the seller's title company? I always encourage you to say sellers there. That is, in my estimation, that is the right way to do it. All right, what is the contact information for the lender? You should have all this already. You probably have a mortgage professional that you work with. If you don't, your buyer has come with a mortgage professional. Totally cool. No problem there. Just go ahead and get a card from them or get their contact information because you're going to need to fill all this information out. If there's any contingencies, you're going to need to input that information here. Here's a side note for you. A contingency, by the way, would be like, I need to sell my house to buy this one, or whatever the case may be. Could also be the financing contingency. But anyway, they will not take an offer, in my experience, where there's a contingency to sell your house. So just be aware of that. And then if you have any comments on the sale, for instance, something about the property you feel that they should know, you could put that there as well. All of your information is going to be pre-populated here if you are a registered agent. And of course, if you've gotten to this point, you are a registered agent. So go ahead and approve this information here. Now you're going to hit the continue button, which we're not going to do in this exercise because I don't want to really buy this house. But what would happen on the very next page is you would review the information and then be given an opportunity to upload your documents. And let's quickly talk about what documents you would need to upload. You would need to upload the as-is FAR contract in its completion with signatures from your buyer and from your secondary buyer if they had a spouse or someone they're buying the house with. And you would need to upload the real estate purchase addendum. So you're going to want to set aside time once you fill those out on the other tab there to have your client either e-sign them or sign them in person. So some agents will go ahead and type all this information up ahead of time, and then they'll have it ready to upload. Some will kind of go back and forth. You can save and exit if you want to come back in at a later time and finish this up because you want to maybe run out and get your contract signed. So just time it at whatever's appropriate for your business. The client will ultimately determine that based upon their availability. So that would be the process to submitting an offer on the HomePath website. Again, just to reiterate, you've got to register, you've got to go in, find the property online here on the website, you've got to pull up the necessary addendums and purchase addendums and contract addendums, and then you've got to go through the electronic submission form, which is what we're doing right now. So if you look at this timetable at the top, it's kind of helpful because it'll show you got the offer to purchase, the offer is then going to go into review for you to review it, terms and conditions must be checked, uploading your documents, and then completing the offer. So the only step that we're not going to do in the video today, obviously, is uploading the documents because in that particular scenario, we would actually be making an offer, and we're not going to do that today. All right, so this is going to cover the basics on how to do a HomePath offer. We also have a live class on this several times a year. I do encourage you to get into your offices and get into your online campus to either watch this virtually or get the class in person. There's a lot of different ways to get educated. If you have any questions about this, please contact your office administrator. They will put you in touch with your broker or your office manager, and we will be glad to guide you through your next HomePath offer. I hope this video was helpful today. I appreciate your feedback and look forward to doing lots of business with you here in the near future. Thank you, everybody.